Hello, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Driving Productivity in Biotech Clinical Trials, How to Maximize Valuation for Minimal Cost, presented by Fortrea and Fierce Biotech. My name is Janelle, and I'll be introducing today's webinar. Before we begin, here are a few quick housekeeping items. To learn more about our speakers, please visit the speaker bio window. Additional resources can be found in the handouts window. If you accidentally close a window, you can reopen it by clicking its name in the top navigation bar. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand within 24 hours. And finally, we will host a Q&A session at the end. Feel free to submit your questions at any time using the Submit Questions window. Today, we're joined by an exceptional group of speakers. We have Tracy Newbold, Vice President of Clinical Operations at Lexicon Pharmaceuticals, Terry Athrea, SVP and Global Head of Clinical Operations for Fortrea, and Alaric Jackson, Chief Technology and Data Officer at Fortrea. Guiding today's discussion is our moderator, Dr. Ken Park, VP of R&D Strategy and Innovation Consulting for Fortrea. Dr. Park, over to you.
Thank you so much, Janelle. So hello, everyone. As Janelle mentioned, today we're discussing how to drive productivity in biotech clinical trials, and in particular, how do you maximize valuation for minimal investment? So historically, R&D productivity has always been an area of focus and priority for the industry, but recent trends are particularly challenging. How do you actually realize this ultimate goal? And part of it is that protocols are becoming increasingly complex. Part of that is due to increasing number of total endpoints that are being measured in a clinical trial, more visits, more sites being involved, and we're asking more of the patients when they're going in for their site visits. We're doing more procedures and doing more measurements on them. All of this translates into increased time, increased costs, and this gets further compounded by the rising global costs over the last 5 years, as well as by recent market uncertainties. So how does this translate for a typical biotech? Well, part of it has to do with what is your exit strategy as a biotech. Most biopharma focus on registration and they focus on regulatory success. And as a result, what they're really trying to drill down into is how do they convince a buyer or a potential licensing partner that number one, their drug works, or that number two, that their drug is likely to be approved. And within that, they're trying to balance their cost and time and effort in order to demonstrate those two proof points. And so how you think about this differs depending upon whether or not you're thinking about exiting immediately post POC, sometime between phase 2 and phase 3, or if you're looking for a commercialization partner sometime between phase 3 and launch. But it begs the question, how does large pharma think about licensing an asset from a biotech, or how do they think about a biopharma's valuation? And it's more complicated for a large pharma than simply, is this drug approvable by a regulatory agency? They're thinking about a more complicated equation that includes what's your forecasted revenue? How does that combine against your likelihood of success? How does that get discounted based upon additional costs, time, and risks in order to successfully bring your drug to market? And of course, while a lot of that has to do with the ability to bring it to market from a regulatory approval standpoint, the other elements that they're also thinking through are the commercial elements. Are there competitors who are also coming into the space? What does this look like if a competitor gets to market first? Beyond just demonstrating that you can successfully bring your drug to through regulatory approval, are you able to demonstrate value to a payer? Will a government payer or a private insurance company be willing to pay for your product? And how much research has been done into those areas already by you as a biotech? And if you haven't done it, then how much risk does a large pharma carry if they then license your asset? And also, how much do they have to spend in order to de-risk or answer those questions about your commercial viability? So at Fortrea, when we think about productivity across clinical trials, we really think about it from the very earliest phases around how do you plan for the clinical trial, how do you design it, who's your target population, and what are you trying to demonstrate, all the way through startup, enrollment, project delivery, all the way through close. And across our organization, this is, of course, an important topic. We've done an internal inventory. We have over 400 initiatives that are currently ongoing or have recently been completed that are entirely focused around how do we improve productivity throughout our organization so that we can deliver more effectively for our clients and so that our clients can end up with a more productive clinical trial as well. And when we've done rough estimates of the impacts of multiple stages of productivity initiatives, what we can see is that these types of innovations, they can drive significant cost savings of 40% or higher when fully applied across a clinical trial program. So while this is a big topic, the opportunity and the impact from this is also potentially huge. And for a biotech, personally, when I think about this and put myself into a biotech shoes, a lot of the big question for them does come back to this issue of, are you focusing on regulatory approval? Or are you focusing on value maximization? And the road that you end up taking ends up making a significant difference. I am so delighted to be able to bring today this august group of speakers, of panelists, including Tracy, Terry, and Alaric. And with that, we will transition to our panel discussion. So Tracy, Terry, and Alaric, thank you so much for agreeing to participate as our panelists today. I thought that maybe we would start off with a pretty straightforward question, namely, for each of you, what does productivity as a term mean to you within your context? And for this question, maybe we start with Tracy and then Terry and then finish with Alaric.
Sure. Thank you, Ken. Hi, everyone. So productivity for a small biotech where I am currently can mean really everything. We have it's low revenue generating. We have to really start with the end in mind. We have to be super thoughtful about our key performance indicators. What are we measuring? What are we measuring against? And how are we doing? And I think ultimately pacing these KPIs at a rate where we have a chance to actually mitigate and change course, as trials often have to do.
Yeah. So Tracy, just kind of jumping off with that, having the operational perspective and also working really closely with you throughout the years, there's a little bit of difference when it comes to productivity with maybe a large pharma or biotech. But first, to answer the question with regards to what does productivity mean for me, it doesn't mean cutting corners, and it doesn't mean trying to go faster. I mean, we all know the term work smarter, not faster. It's really about cutting out the friction and risk mitigating. We've all been chasing that penultimate right the first time over the years. And for me, working with biotech, it's really, really important to be right the first time. A small mistake, error, can cause great inefficiency when delivering. So when I look at productivity, it's really honestly going back to the good old management of time, cost, and quality. And how do you actually accelerate or go as fast as you can while not actually having issues with your quality? And for biotech companies, when you think about quality and productivity, one of the things as a CRO and, really focused on project management is, you have a process, you standardize it, it becomes repeatable, then you optimize it. And you see that more and more with maybe large pharma, where they do have standard process you follow. And out of that, you get high quality and acceleration. But sometimes when we're in this more fast agility area of biotech, we have to do things a little bit differently. So we have to kind of hybridize how we standardize a process. We need to work with our biotech companies to, assess risk and understand where we should remain in process and where we may want to go outside a process for a different and faster result. But it is all about managing the triple constraint for me, and it's really not it's making sure your eye is always on the ball, and that you're just managing very tightly.
Well, I think from a technology point of view, I'll bring a different perspective. So if you think like technology productivity, as a developer, it might be number of lines of code shipped, a week or something like that. Or if you're an IT help desk person or support person, it would be number of tickets closed. But where we are now, those metrics still really matter from a productivity point of view. But now there's a much more increase on quality and actually how much time is freed up for innovation. And so efficiency is becoming a much bigger play in the technology space, because if you think about where technology plays, a lot of times in biotech and pharma, it's a support function. And so fundamentally, you have to make sure that the systems operate smoothly so as that you're not impacting adversely the operational teams. And then the other side of technology in biopharma and pharma is actually innovation. What can technology do to accelerate the pipeline? And so by being able to kind of carve out more time for your team to innovate, that actually helps deliver the pipeline as well as improve the efficiency of the tech team as well.
Thank you so much. Tracy, you start off by talking a little bit about how you work backwards from what is it that you're trying to achieve, your end goal and objective. How do you actually try to balance, or how does a biotech try to define the difference between a near-term opportunity or a near-term objective versus your long-term exit strategy?
Sure. And that's a great question, because sometimes those two aren't very far apart, given how much time we have and what our budget is, and being beholden to multiple stakeholders, where we're having to publicly disclose at certain milestones. So we're just as thoughtful as we can be about near term, and we have to be careful too, because there is this, and I know Terry talked about this as well, but this kind of tendency to try to do things as quickly as possible. And I don't think I've seen a time yet where we haven't had to self-correct for making that decision. So it's really managing expectations, and being able to do it right the first time, so that we can accomplish near-term goals as soon as possible, but the right way, in order to achieve that long-term goal, which oftentimes, if you don't do it thoughtfully, that ends up getting pushed out.
And Terry, you mentioned a little bit about right the first time, and Tracy, you echoed that same term. I know that some of our experience has been that choices in both protocol design as well as in site selection, or even sometimes seemingly innocuous choices around how data is collected during a particular visit, can sometimes end up snowballing into a much bigger deal later on, when we realize that it wasn't right that first time and an amendment has to be applied. Terry, can you share a little bit more about that right the first time, and maybe an example of a time when it went well as opposed to a time when it didn't?
Yeah, I can certainly talk to that. Right the first time, as I say, is really, really important. And, coming from a CRO and owning the boots on the ground, heading up our operations, I have the people that are going to make mistakes. So, I know we want to talk about how it works. And I think, what I'm seeing, and I've been in this industry since 1992. So I've gone from paper to digital. I mean, yesterday we were talking about how much we loved Excel and pivot tables and now Power BI and all of our dashboards. But every time we make these transitions to innovation, we get closer to right the first time. So for me, it's about taking kind of the human element and error out of something. And, one of the things, common mistakes you see, which you wonder why it's common, but again, it's human error. We all are error prone, right? Is just simple things like informed consent and submitting it to the regulators. And there's a lot of copying and pasting, and you're in lots of countries and sites, and they have their own language, and someone forgets to put or leave in something about genetic sampling. It happens all the time. Or the PK samples. And then it goes in, it gets approved, and then we realize it's cut out and we have to start all over again. And that becomes really inefficient. Where I've seen technology really help me and my team is using some of our AI technology to actually re-review our documents and make sure that we're not missing crucial information. And not only does it help with ensuring right the first time, and I've seen it like in a lot of regulatory documents, and you can actually loop protocols and your IB and your ICF together and kind of come up with this information. But it also speeds up the process. So, it's catching things that a human eye can't catch, but it's also doing things like, for example, within my contracts group, we run a QC check where it used to take 45 minutes to QC a document to make sure that the right elements are in there, which could, you could have human error in because you're doing that. And it's gone from 40 minutes, 45-minute review to a 5-minute review. And then co-pilot, co-intelligence, that we talk about, you can't just let AI and ML do it on their own, but you do a review, but it just cuts down things so fast. But where I see the best results is that it's cutting down on the human error, and the human error, it can be very costly.
Alaric, would love to hear from you for a moment. From the technology perspective, I know that you and your team are always looking for the productivity areas that are hardest for the organization to crack, and where technology can make a big difference. Can you give an example or an experience of an area of productivity that's particularly challenging that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole site visit process, what's involved for a CRA to go to a site, to meet with the investigator, to monitor the data. There's so many data touch points, right? And the challenge there is, as well as it's not just you turn up on site and you execute it. There's a whole lot of preparation that goes on before it, where you're reviewing the notes from the previous visit, and that takes time. So one of the things we're looking to do is optimize that CRA experience so that imagine a world where you can converse with, natural language, say, okay, I was on Dr. Smith's site last week or last month monitoring the study. What were the key actions, right? And that conversely coming back to you quickly. So that's a big area where what that then means is the CRA can spend more quality time with the investigator and build the relationship at the site and focus on the really high import issues. I mean, monitoring data is critical as well, as it always is, but fundamentally this way you're freeing up more time, not just for the CRA, but also for the investigator as well, because we know how difficult it is for them or their research assistant to get time. And I think that the site visit element is somewhere where it has been tough. We've moved to more remote visits, especially with COVID in recent years and things like that. But it's still a big area of opportunity for us to improve further the experience of all the constituents there.
And Alaric, to add on to that and how we're looking and digitizing, I really like where we're going with kind of our persona I can't say that word, digital phase. And, for me in operations, being able to use our data in different ways is really, really important. And it's important for me for our clients, like with Tracy. As simple as resource allocation and being able to be more predictive of having the right person in the right place at the right time, with the ability to actually ramp up in the way. I mean, it's very common. We have a lot of labor shortages, ups and downs in this industry. One of the biggest complaints you'll hear always with CROs is just, resource allocation and having those people. And so, having that data and being able to use it in kind of different angles really is helpful for me, and it helps become or create kind of a efficient operating model for our clients.
Tracy, I'd love to hear from you. What are a couple of areas where you're really excited about how productivity can be addressed in a different way or achieve a different level of success?
Yeah, one that's coming to mind now and has been incredibly a game changer for us is really biometrics that we've had. There's a certain percentage, and I think it's around 13% of patients who are clinical trial shoppers, and we've lost a lot of data and a lot of time and a lot of productivity when we realize that we have data from the same person who's actually going to different sites to join the trial. And so things like that, like biometrics now, have saved us. I can't even tell you. It's a tremendous number of attempts that we were able to navigate successfully to ensure that the integrity of the data is there, and it's really the same person all through the trial. So that's one area that's been incredibly exciting in the last few trials that we've conducted with Fortrea.
That's a fascinating phenomenon, and it's great to hear that you're starting to be able to address it. Terry, how about yourself and Alaric? What's maybe one or two areas where you're particularly excited about how new initiatives can lead to more than just an incremental change, but really a step change in how we perform?
I have two that really kind of come to mind, and they're a little bit different. And I'll start with the non-technology one. But technology has helped enable us to think differently. In the study startup space, there are lots of variables that come to play. And when I'm working with my team to deliver, there are kind of three areas that I have them focus on. And each one of those areas they may focus on a little bit more. So first and foremost, things that are 100% in our control at Fortrea, we need to be 100% on. We need to deliver. It is in our control. We all need to know what we need to do, and that's really important. The second thing is things that are not within our control, like a regulatory body comes down and denies something, IMP issues, things of that nature, where we cannot control. We often spend time trying to work around those uncontrollables, but I try to push my teams not to focus on that, because when something like a shock like that happens, we need to figure out a different way to meet the deliverables while monitoring that uncontrollable situation. And the third is what's in our sphere of influence. And sphere of influence are things like vendor management issues, contract delays between the site or customers. I mean, those are the things that we need to really partner with our sites and our customers on to push forward. But looking at those three buckets and looking how traditionally we start up sites has been really, really basic over the years. And partly because we just haven't had the ability to have the data to understand where we should actually focus, where there will be impact. So at the beginning, I talked about time, costs, and quality. How many times have we just thrown bodies at an issue and think it's going to get better? And I like to always argue, actually, adding bodies to a situation may actually cause more risk of quality concerns, because now you have more heads that may not be doing things as standard. So I think it's really important to actually focus on impact. And So using data, we have run several trials now where standard in the industry, we have certain KPIs, first patient in, 25% ready to enroll, 50% ready to enroll, 80% ready to enroll. And we're always focused on getting X amount that we projected or forecast into those buckets. But what we're finding is through more predictive analytics and better forecasting using both data that we have and then public data and putting it together, that we can actually find the sites that can actually enroll very fast and will enroll to what they said they are, but it still helps you kickstart your study. But the biggest site you want to focus on is the site that will roll really fast, enroll what they said they were going to do, but also keep enrolling beyond what was expected of them. And through some of our predictive analytics, we see that. And by looking at data and working closely with some of our sponsors, we've been able to convince them that, okay, we're going to have these KPIs of 25% and 50% and 75%, but we're actually going to put more of our effort into the sites that we have analytics that say they're actually going to deliver your trial. We all know in our industry that sites not actually giving you patients is a big inefficiency. And now we start having data where we can see where we can actually put our effort. And when doing that, we've had a couple trials that we've actually been able to accelerate by over a year. And why was that really important? Because it's competition. We talked about it at the very beginning, and the saturation of patient population. And I'm just really happy that we've had the ability where we've had people take the leap to actually come with a journey of thinking differently with us to actually accelerate. And how can we do that? Through kind of that data. So I think that's a really good place where I'm really excited about just pushing the norm of what we're used to. And then the second is just with technology. There's so much with technology now, and I just can't believe how fast it's come. And Ken, you and I have had a lot of these discussions, just the difference between the last 3 years, AI being able to add 1 + 1, or the fact that between ChatGPT 3 and 4, it went from being able to pass standardized medical and legal tests by 10%, and then in a new version, AI is passing it by 90%, how fast it's going. And so it's really exciting. And I know, we have to kind of, in this regulated environment, be cautious, because we also know that AI is so smart that it can trick us. So we're always looking at that. But there are a couple things that I like to bucket. There are the super fun things, and some of the things are kind of mundane that just actually help your life. And so starting out with AI technology, just with admin and being able to take meeting minutes and action items. I mean, I don't know how much time I used to spend on my couch at night with my family, with my computer on my lap. I'm there, maybe I'm not fully engaged, but now with some of the technology we have, I have all my action items at a kind of a push button, and I actually can loop them in with other meetings I've had to see progress. And then I can send that out to my teams. And so that really, really helps us. Any kind of administrative burden, we always do after hours. And I think that's been great. Compliance for me in operations, compliance is one of the biggest things, being inspection ready. For Tracy, we want to be inspection ready at all time for you. And being able to monitor our compliance in different ways has been really important. And, Alaric, what you were talking about before with some of our digitization, see, I've finally been able to say the word, and how we're actually pulling data and being able to use it in different ways for different perspectives. It is a game changer for me with compliance, and giving Tracy the transparency of compliance so we can be in it together if we find a problem. And that's really cool. And what we all call the sexy thing is all this predictive analysis, from enrollment, risk-based monitoring, risk-based QM. I think this is going to be really evolutionary, and this is a place there that I'm really focused on. And one of the 400 initiatives, Ken, in our organization, is really talking about the operating model of the future. And it used to be the CRA of the future, and to me, it's the execution model of the future. And by using some of these more predictive analyses and centralized data collection tools, we're actually going to be able for once to make real-time decisions. So that was my tactical and more technology view. And I could go on and on, but I guess I'll hand it over to you, Howard.
Yeah, that's better. I mean, I think a couple of things, right? So one that is, it's been going on in our industry for a while, but it's making this now possible, right? Is the speed of data. If you think about the industry previously, it took a long time for data to flow from site to EDC to CRO to sponsor. And so what I'm really excited about is frictionless data, the ability for that data to flow really quickly so that we can monitor the study more effectively, and also the sponsor can provide oversight and gets visibility to all those metrics really quickly, and so we can see signals earlier in the process rather than later in the process and be proactive about it. And I think that's one thing that's it's not AI, but it's just the acceleration of data getting to a world where it is real-time data, as opposed to you waiting for the IVR to provide you data every week to know how many patients are randomized. That's just something that I think is foundational and fantastic. Another thing, and it is a bit of a buzzword, and it's the hype cycle at the moment, is agentic AI. I think that is something that truly will provide huge benefits to the industry. Now, it's not suitable, out of the gate for everything, because to your point, Terry, we're very heavily regulated, and so the idea of having an autonomous agent carrying out things with limited human supervision can be a problem. But I think the key thing there is the maturity of agentic AI, using it for the right problem case or the right use cases, and building into it. What I find about AI, or what we've seen with AI, is it can make a decision that's right, but what it doesn't do a great job with is explaining it. And so the key opportunity for us is being very crisp about explainability plans. Say, look, we're recommending action A, and the reason we're recommending action A is for these 3 steps, so that the human in the loop, or the regulatory scientist or the medic, can say, yeah, I agree with that. That makes sense. Let's go that path. And I think that's something, if we think about productivity, that will make a massive impact across all the dimensions, whether it be investigator, patient, sponsor, site, and regulator.
Both of you have highlighted some really exciting opportunities. What does it really take to bring these things to life, to go from simply, oh, here's an area where we know we have a problem, to here's a potential solution, to we've actually rolled it out so that now it works within our organization? Because there's a lot of steps in there. So what would you say are you have to do the following couple of things right in order for that to work?
So, I mean, Ken, I think from my point of view, based on, good experience and bad experiences, the key thing to make a success of it is don't just take an old analog process and digitize it. Really question, is there a better way of doing this? Rather than going from A to B to C to D, can you go from A to D, right? That's critical. But as part of that change management, it's bringing everyone along the way. Senior leadership at all our organizations are always going to say how important productivity is, right? And we all agree with that. But philosophically, it has to mean something to the people who are doing the work on the ground to be really vested in it. And I think having the people who really understand the process involved every step of the way, investing in them to make the process better, is absolutely critical, because that then drives adoption. As opposed, if you look at industry in general and pharma, one of the challenges you see a lot with AI initiatives is there are lots and lots of pilots, thousands of pilots in big organizations, but you know what? Very few take off and get adopted at scale. And when we've talked about it with some of our customers and some of our peers, it's just been the buy-in hasn't been there. There was the buy-in at the beginning, but actually as things got tough, it just didn't continue. So I think that change management thing, Ken, is absolutely critical across the initiative from outset to delivery.
So it doesn't work to just build it and they will come.
Sadly not.
Well, We have some questions from the audience, and I apologize that we probably won't be able to get through all of them, but we'll have the opportunity to reply offline for any questions that we don't get to. One of the questions is actually to Terry and to Alaric. What technologies or services that are new would you recommend or wish that sponsors would take advantage of in their clinical trials?
Yes, I can start, Alaric. So, I'll speak to Tracy. We're working together, and, I think you've been, an early adapter to a lot of our technologies and agents. And, for me, it's not the technology. I think that it's about embracing and also making it hard to backslide. And so maybe one place I could talk about is our XRIM, our risk-based quality management. I think it's really important to use it and feel comfortable with it and see the power of it. And, in this industry, how long have we been doing 100% SDV? And we all know, we've seen the papers, that 100% SDV doesn't mean better quality, safety for the patients. It just means, we sent someone out and they looked at an EMR and an EDC and said that they looked the same. And so I feel like that this is another place where we focus a lot of effort where it doesn't have impact. But because we've done it that way in the past, we always backslide to that. But now what I'm seeing is if you use a risk-based quality management system and have a really good, robust process about it, you can actually be proactive and not reactive. And I think that's the most important thing. Tracy, we've been talking about this, is that having the ability to centralize the data and look at it in a centralized way, to actually see the real trends and not see it after the fact, is really important. But often we backslide right back to that 100% SDV, and we wait until database lock to find our issues when the data was sitting there right in front of our face. So that I would just suggest, utilizing and being comfortable with access to the data. And it's going to be changing. So like I said, in a ChatGPT, it's going fast. AI, it's going fast. We're learning more and more. So I think it's really, really, really important that we just keep down the same path together on it.
I'm really glad you mentioned risk-based monitoring. That's definitely an example where we were much more comfortable historically with the classical monitoring approach. And with risk-based monitoring, it's focusing on sites at risk. You're not doing the same thing for all sites that aren't doing the same thing with enrollment. And it's less expensive as well. So we kept thinking that there's something wrong with it because it was saving money. But it's been hugely helpful. And with XRIM that you also mentioned, we now have a cross-partner, cross-functional way to really understand the whole story. And we can do it in real time. And it's been a huge game changer for sponsor oversight, for data reliability, and to really have a mutual trust that we're doing the right thing at the right time.
I mean, so perspective for me, and it really sounds strange coming from the technology guy, right, about this, is sometimes we're drawn to the bright, shiny things, right? And like, oh, there's this really cool tech and this is going to be transformative. And honestly, that's often not what we need. We can make incremental improvements that will make a massive impact over time. So I think always when we look at what we could do from a technology point of view or an implementation point of view, we always ask the so what. What is the impact going to be upon this project, this program, and ultimately the whole development life cycle? And I think that's really critical because, as I say, there's a lot of great technology that's come into our industry and it continues to flow. But always, I think we just need to look really carefully at, is this going to impact my project positively? Because as we talked about a bit earlier on, their change management may be steep, and it's just trying to balance those across the board.
So
Tracy? Oh,
oh,
sorry, go ahead, Terry.
I was just going to add on that for me when diving in and suggesting some of these things. It's also understanding what kind of impact it will have, and
Yeah.
also really training people on some of these technologies. And I think it probably is better, would have been better in one of the other questions Ken to bring up. But I do think it's really important to give people the time to understand how this data translates into impact for them, but also where the data is coming from, and not to be afraid of it. For me, you know, embracing it with everyone within my organization, I need to let them know this is not about trying to do more with less. This is about like being able to do more, like a lot more with the same amount of people. So I think it's really important. And if we can actually be more efficient, then we can even, you know, help Tracy out to do more studies because it's more cost effective. So I think that's a really important point that I wanted to make before.
Tracy, I want to give you an opportunity to weigh in by flipping the question on its head a bit. So if originally the question was, what would a CRO recommend or suggest that sponsors should make sure that they take advantage of in a clinical trial? What do you as a sponsor, if you could have your magical wish list, what would you want a CRO to be able to bring to you within your trials that could massively make a difference for you?
Yeah, thank you, Ken. I think what's really helpful is if there's in addition to technology and footprint, I mean, this is all very important. There's a therapeutic understanding and an understanding of patient burden, site burden. How are we doing with our protocol? Is it really operationalized? I can even say that. Can you operationalize it? We need that feedback because we're sort of in this closed think tank asking all these questions. We're trying to get as many questions as we can think of answered in the same protocol. And we may not have vetted it outside of the company. Is it going to work from the CRO's perspective? Is it going to work for the sites, for the PIs? And we've oftentimes, we end up amending our protocols multiple times as we learn the hard way. So I think that's helpful. I know it's hard to get that protocol out of the sponsor's hands in time to review it and give feedback, but that's something that I wish would happen every time. A couple things, just two examples of things we've had to pull back because we weren't as thoughtful as we should have been about it. So we had a patient population that was, and there's two problems with the e-consent. One is that trust factor isn't there yet for a lot of patients with remote consent. They want to talk to their doctor. They want to see their doctor be okay with it. You know, that this is a trial that they think is actually potentially beneficial for the patient and provides them options they wouldn't have otherwise. So that's key as well.
I love that you brought that up. I've oftentimes stated that one of the most important predictors of success for most endeavors, but certainly true within clinical trials, is the ability to put yourself in the shoes of the buyer or of the participant and really understand what will their experience be like. Is this something that you would have done if you were in their shoes? Because if not, then maybe this isn't going to work quite as well as what you would have wanted otherwise. So it is a great point. Would love to ask folks, and here's another question. It says, what do you see as differences between how large pharma and smaller biotech approach the issue around productivity?
I mean, I'm happy to go first on this one. So I think, you know, my take is that in some way, biotech is empowered because they don't have the complicated system landscape that big pharma has. Like, you know, maybe they've grown by acquisition, etc. They have many data systems, many data fabrics, all those things. So actually, change can be tricky in that situation. You can implement change, but maybe not across the whole portfolio. With biotech, because generally speaking, you have a more simplified set of systems, or in fact, you might be using the CRO systems holistically, you can actually get change implemented a lot faster. And I think is an advantage for biotech relative to the larger organizations.
I would agree with you there, Alaric, and I want to apologize. I picked up a summer cold from my daughter's university graduation, but absolutely, I think the agility, although, up front I talked about standardization of process actually helps with quality and acceleration. When you're going through a study, we don't go down the garden path. Like certain shocks come in, and sometimes we have to change, and we have to do that fast. And if you are in a large establishment that has a lot of procedural bureaucracy, that can cause a lot of delay in white space. And I find that working with my biotech clients, we can be more adaptable and quicker. And so I came from a small biotech myself, and I understand that, even with technology, it's also with like how we set up a team. It's not just about technology. It's about process. It's about maybe hybridizing roles within a study team. And there are all sorts of different ways that I feel my biotech clients are actually not only embracing, but expecting.
And just to finish that
Please,
out, sorry again. I just want
please.
to say I fully agree with Alaric and Terry, and having worked in both large and mid-size and small biotech, I can kind of see the trending down with going from being highly bureaucratic. Time is less of an essence in the larger pharma. It may be with your competitive space, but they can afford generally to think through things, have a meeting about their last meeting, and then have another meeting where they make a decision to have another meeting. So, whereas in biotech, we have meetings that matter, and that's all the time we have, all that we can afford to do. So it's really the agility, as Terry mentioned, is critical. And when we need a meeting, it's because we need to talk through something and maybe change direction.
Recognizing that we're coming towards the end of our session, and I want to close out with a question for each of you, which is, what would you recommend to a biotech that they should do when working with a CRO in order to improve their productivity? How should they approach a CRO? What should that conversation look like?
Yeah, I would, if I may start, I fully believe that the relationship can make or break the success of the trial. I think that one thing that Lexicon does uniquely, and I credit our CMO for this, is that, for example, when the database is locked and the data is analyzed, eventually there's a press release, and the CRO has to look in their email and find it, or look through the web to find out what that press release is. We don't do that. I mean, we have to follow a communication chain, but in many cases, as much as we can, we involve the CRO in the outcome of the data, like actually hold a meeting with the full team members, talk about the data, talk about how it was analyzed, and next steps for the trial. So really truly partner. And that's one of the reasons we've been partners with Fortrea for over 10 years, is because there's a relationship there. I think far too often, especially in larger pharma, it's easy to think you need another CRO, when in fact, it's really the relationship that needs to be worked on.
I love that, Tracy. I mean, one of the greatest moments of my life is working on one of the first immunomodulators that went to the market, and actually being invited to the FDA with the biotech company. It was just fabulous. And to add on and answer the question, Ken, I would just say, as an extension of the team, utilize us for any question. You know, we're a consulting partner, and you know, honestly, when we work together, it helps us learn as well. But if you're a small biotech company and you don't have the access to the people that we have, we're always willing to help and answer and test a protocol and think about it. Those are like the fun parts of our jobs. And we always love it when we have the opportunity to partner, like we get to partner with you, Tracy.
I mean, yeah, I think probably not much to add there. I think the partnership is key, you know, both stakeholders coming together and transparency as well. Because the reality of the situation is not everything will go smoothly every time. That's just the nature of the beast, honestly. But being transparent and early to warn that there's challenges and work together on it is absolutely critical for the success of anything moving forward.
Well, I want to make sure to thank each of you, Tracy, Terry, Alaric, for your time, for all of your insights that you've shared with the audience today. And so with that, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers and to the audience for all of those great questions. We will follow up with anybody whose question didn't get answered. And as a reminder, a recording of this session will be available on demand within 24 hours. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.